Chapter 25. Silent No More. The lantern burned low on the small wooden table, casting shadows on the walls of the hovel. There were no windows in his house to let in the light, but Kaisimir liked it that way. Not the lack of light, but the privacy. He took another bite of his stew, turning the crystal in his other hand. If the other elves knew he still had Petrina's focus, what would they think? He had promised to get rid of all her magic items, but he could not part with this one. He looked at the small opalescent crystal, remembering the day he had given it to her. "I'm sorry," he thought. "I'm so sorry." There was a knock at the door, interrupting his nightly apologies. Kaisimir stashed the crystal in his tunic pocket and opened the door. It was Nikolai and Volsung. "Come in," Kaisimir said, as rain from the dark sky poured down upon them. They entered, and Nikolai shook his cloak and huffed. "He almost did it this time," the older elf said, "and I found him with this." Nikolai handed Kaisimir a dagger. Volsung's eyes were red and swollen, as if he had been crying. "I could have done it too," Volsung stammered. He was young, only 73, not a child, but not yet a man. "What happened?" Kaisimir asked. "He was on his way to Arigal's wagon when I saw that thing in his hand," Nikolai said. "I knew he was out for blood." "Let Volsung talk," Kaisimir said, turning to the younger elf. Volsung clenched his fists as rainwater dripped from his white hair. "I've had enough, and I had to do something. He killed Lancelot." "Your dog?" Kaisimir asked gently. Volsung's face contorted with anger. "Arigal and his friends were drinking, like they do. They were playing some stupid knife-throwing game, and they killed him." "It was mostly an accident," said Nikolai. "The dog ran in front of the drunkards when they were throwing at a tree." "But they don't care, father." Volsung's bitter eyes glared at Nikolai. "They don't care what they did to my dog." "And you want revenge?" Kaisimir asked Volsung. "Damn well I do." The young elf looked down, his cheeks flushed with rage. "And then there's—" Kaisimir waited for him to finish, but he did not. Thunder cracked outside, and Kaisimir felt the tremor in his chest. Deep down he knew what was left unspoken. "We don't have to talk about it," Kaisimir remarked. "That's just it," Volsung spoke up. "No one ever talks about it. No one." "Is this about Gabriella?" Nikolai put a hand on his son. Volsung shrugged off the hand. "It's not just her. I can't be with anyone. Do you know how many times I've been beaten just for looking at a human woman?" He pressed his fist to his chest. "Our people will die. We will die after we've been forced to live a life that can never be fully lived." Kaisimir promised to talk with Luvash in the morning. He would get Volsung another dog, and things would get better. But when Volsung and Nikolai left, Kaisimir took out the crystal from his pocket, and the guilt took hold once more. "Forgive me, Petrina," Kaisimir thought. "Forgive me, and I'll forgive you. We'll forgive each other for what we've done to our people." In the morning, the storm had not let up. Kaisimir pulled his cowl over his head and walked out his door into the downpour. Thunder rumbled low. "The Count must be having a bad day," he thought, as the rain pelted on his hood. He walked up the muddy hill past the wagons and the horses, and entered the large red tent. "Kaisimir, there you are!" Luvash said in his loud voice. The Vistana was with his daughter, eating breakfast around one of the 3 fire pits. "Arabelle's tutor is sick today, so I thought you could fill in. It'll be easy. What were you working on again, Arabelle?" Arabelle sighed and finished the last bite of eggs on her plate. "A silly reading lesson." "There," said Luvash, chewing on a sausage. "Just a simple reading lesson." "Luvash," Kaisimir said, scanning the tent for Arigal. One of the elves lost his dog last night. Your brother killed it by accident. By accident? Luvash said with his mouth full. Was he drunk? Kaisimir nodded and relayed what Volsung had told him. Luvash took a drink from his mug. Sorry the boy lost his dog, but you know Aragal. You will talk to him? Yes, yes. He took another bite of sausage. I'll repay the boy for the animal. Thank you. When Luvash got up and left the fire, Arabelle hopped from her seat and skipped over to Kaisimir. Since you'll be watching me, she whispered to him, can you show me the lightning? One corner of Kasimir's mouth turned up, and he took out his wand. It crackled, and a thin spark, about the size of a finger, shot from the tip and danced through the air around the girl. She giggled and touched it. The spark fizzled out. Show me more, she said. Can you turn into a polar bear? A polar bear? That would be something. But no, that is a spell I can't do. What about a small animal, like a squirrel? Kaisimir shook his head. Not even a little chipmunk? She folded her hands in front of her chest and puffed out her cheeks. Not even a little chipmunk, Kaisimir said. The elf bear could do it. I wish I could be like her. An image of the young dusk elf maiden flashed across Kasimir's mind, but he held his thoughts in check. Rowan. He had not recognized her name at first, but at night, when he thought of her in his dreams, he realized who she was, and how much danger she would be in if Strahd found out the truth. But how had she survived? Kaisimir wondered where Rowan and her friends were now. He did not dare to hope that she was alive and well. He was old enough to know that hope was what drove people mad. Kaisimir stashed his wand under his cloak and was about to take Arabelle to her wagon when Luvash called to him. The large man was standing by the open tent flap, and his face had gone white. Kaisimir, Luvash said with a tremor in his voice. I need you to gather all the people at the north side of the hill. A crease formed on Kasimir's brow. When he looked past Luvash into the pouring rain, a terrible sight met his eyes. Rahadin. Kaisimir did as Luvash instructed, with Arabelle close at his heels. Everyone he met, elf or human, blanched with fear at the name of Rahadin. Arabelle tugged on Kasimir's cloak. Uncle Kaz, why are the Vistani afraid of an elf? Because this elf always brings bad news, Kaisimir said. In truth, Rahadin was known as the Reaper, for anywhere he went, someone usually died. And it was said that if you stood too close to him, you could hear the screams of the thousands he had slaughtered. When everyone in the camp had gathered on the hillside, draped in various cloaks that did little to keep out the wet, Luvash walked through the crowd with Rahadin. A short blue riding cape hung from the elf's shoulders. His clothes, from his high-collared coat and limp cravat to his muddy boots, were drenched. But he did not seem to mind. His hair was flattened to his head by the rain, making his long pointed ears more pronounced. And the scar across his forehead was a reminder that this was a man who had seen many battles. Each person took a step back as he walked past them to the top of the hill. The chamberlain's cold expression was devoid of emotion. He paused, surveying the apprehensive crowd for what seemed like a whole minute, while the rain poured down and chilled them to the bone. Kaisimir stood with Arabelle a few yards away from Luvash. Now that everyone is here, Rahadin said at last, I have a message from the Lord of Barovia. Before anyone could blink, the elf's sword was drawn from its sheath and quivering on the other side of Luvash's neck. Rahadin lowered his blade as Luvash's head slid from his body and rolled down the hill. Arabelle screamed, and Kaisimir held her tight turning her face away from her father's body as it dropped to the ground. Rahadin held up his hand to quell the few cries that had erupted from the crowd. Now the roar of falling rain and a few whimpers were all that remained. "Luvash was a traitor to his lord," Rahadin explained, wiping his sword on a kerchief from his vest. "First, he was hiding stolen property from the Count." He threw the wet kerchief on the dead body. "And second, he aided the Count's enemies by giving them said stolen property." He sheathed his sword. Arabelle sobbed, and Rahadin looked at her with the same pitiless eyes that had pierced Kaisimir when his parents had died all those centuries ago. "You should be thankful he was killed quickly," Rahadin said to her. "I cannot say the same for the man I hanged this morning." Kaisimir glowered at the real traitor. "Be careful, Kaisimir," Rahadin said. "You did a poor job advising your last master. Make sure the next one behaves himself, or I may take more than your ears the next time I come." The crowd parted, giving Rahadin a wide berth as he strode down the hill. Kaisimir watched the bent heads of elves and Vistani alike. They were all afraid, yet acquiescent to their fear. Aragal knelt in the mud beside his brother. It was hard to tell if he was crying in the driving rain. Then he sniffed and got to his feet. "You two," Aragal said, summoning two elves that stood nearby. One of them was Volsung. "Take Luvash's body and bury it in the woods. Let me know when you're finished." Volsung bowed. All the anger and defiance that Kaisimir had seen in the boy hours ago was gone, washed away like the blood that was running down the hillside. That same submissive acceptance was etched in the eyes of every elf in Barovia. Aragal walked over to Kaisimir. "I want you to take Arabelle to her grandfather," he said. "She'll be better off there. And don't take long coming back. I have things to do, and I'll need you here with me." "Please let Uncle Kaz stay with me," Arabelle pleaded. "No," Aragal said curtly. "And Arabelle, never call Kaisimir your uncle again. I am your uncle, and you do what I say." Kaisimir and Arabelle left on horseback, riding double. Kaisimir looked back at the camp on the hill, remembering how he had once loved this place. Luvash had not possessed the honorable virtues of his ancestors, but at least he had earned Kaisimier's respect. In Aragal, there was nothing left to respect. On the evening of the next day, they made it to the Vistani camp by the Tser pool. Madame Eva greeted them and embraced her granddaughter, inviting Kaisimir into her tent. Once Arabelle was put to bed, Madame Eva sat at the velvet-covered table beside Kaisimir and lit a long-stemmed pipe with nothing but a flick of her fingers. "I'm sorry about Luvash," Kaisimir said, after telling her the details. "The pain never stops, you know," she said, brushing a tear from her eye. "Even when they die of old age. I hate losing family." Madame Eva had had many grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, all the way up to 16 generations. Arabelle was the youngest of her descendants. "Rahadin is cruel," she said. "But who can stop him?" "Rumor has it that you know who can." Kaisimir leaned forward in his chair. "I only know what the cards show me," she said, blowing smoke into the already cloudy room. "We both know you can see more than that." Madame Eva smiled and took a long draw from her pipe. Her grey-streaked curls hung in ringlets by her eyes. "I saw that 3 strangers could bring change to this valley. Perhaps they can even save it." "By saving him?" Madame Eva narrowed her eyes. "You forget," Kaisimir said, speaking candidly. "I've been here since before the curse, same as you. I know why you stay in Barovia, even though you could leave whenever you wish. and it's not just to save the valley, but to save every lost soul trapped in it. Madame Eva shrugged her shoulders and adjusted her seat.
When did you become so bold?
I'm not going back, Kaisimir said. I can't stay silent any longer while my people suffer and die. I need to find those strangers and help them.
Since you feel the need to tell me about myself and my reasons for doing what I do, I think I shall tell you yours. You're going to the Amber Temple. You want to bargain for Petrina's life.
Kaisimir's stoic expression did not change, but Madame Eva could see through him much more easily than he could see through her. I think she's repented, the elf said.
She's dead.
Madame Eva gave a skeptical frown and puffed on her pipe. And what about your prince? He's not really alive, and you obviously don't think he's beyond repentance? Madame Eva smiled.
Well, I hope you find the truth, Kaisimir. But where will you start?
Kaisimir got up to leave. His spellbook was hidden at his sanctum near the falls. He would go there first. Then he would find that minstrel from the Blue Water Inn, the last person he had seen with the strangers. I think I'll travel the road for a while, he said.
Fine. Keep your secrets if you must. But Kaisimir, be careful.
Arabelle came running up to Kaisimir just as he was about to mount his horse.
When will I see you again?
The little girl asked him, taking his hand and tracing her fingers over his palm. I'll come back to see you soon, he said. Be good for your grandmother. Arabelle had tears in her frightened eyes and looked up from his palm, shaking her head.
Oh, Uncle Kaz! Oh, no! Please don't go!
Arabelle, Kaisimir said calmly. Did you see something in my hand?
Your future. I saw you die.